Hey, let's run away together.
My daughter pleaded with me, her eyes on the verge of tears. Curious about what was going on, I asked her, and she handed me a stuffed animal with a recording function.
Dad said he doesn't need mom or me. He likes a different lady.
My tearful daughter had recorded my husband's voice on the stuffed animal. Faced with the horrifying revelation, I made up my mind to escape.
Wait! I won't allow you to leave like that.
My disabled mother-in-law stopped us with a fierce expression. My name is Willow, a 33-year-old stay-at-home mom. I live with my husband Nolan, who is 2 years older than me, our 5-year-old daughter Alice, and Nolan's mother. Initially, after marriage, I worked as an office clerk in the same company as Nolan. However, I resigned when I became pregnant. Since then, I've been a full-time homemaker. Nolan also quit his job 6 months ago. I knew for a year that he was discussing starting a business with an old friend. He had been preparing while still working at his previous job. When everything was ready for the business venture, we decided to move to Nolan's hometown, changing both our work and house. That's when we began living with my mother-in-law, about 6 months ago. My father-in-law had already passed away, and my mother-in-law, who has mobility issues and mild cognitive impairment, lives alone with the help of caregivers. However, due to the spacious property at the family home, we renovated it to accommodate all of us.
I'm busy, you know. Take care of mom for me.
Nolan's joint business venture with a friend was in the wholesale industry. He was always busy, frequently traveling for procurement. As a result, household chores, childcare, and even caring for my mother-in-law became my responsibility. Although my mother-in-law can manage to move around independently with the help of a cane or walker, complex household tasks and long-distance outings require assistance. Since then, my days have been filled with the back and forth between my own room and my mother-in-law's, taking care of both housework and her needs after dropping Alice off at kindergarten. Hello. I've come to prepare dinner. With a smile, I greeted my perpetually stern-faced mother-in-law. Since we started living together, I had never seen her smile. Yet, she hadn't subjected me to the kind of mistreatment that's often associated with in-laws. It wasn't that she disliked me, rather, her frustration stemmed from her loss of physical independence. Although she didn't express gratitude with a smile, she always ate the meals I prepared neatly and never interfered with household chores. When we first met before my marriage, she was a cheerful and kind mother-in-law. I realized that losing physical freedom could be incredibly stressful for anyone. I believed my mother-in-law was suffering too, so I dedicated myself to caring for her. One day, while cleaning her room, she approached me from behind.
Willow, take this.
She handed me a large diamond ring. Oh. What's this?
It's the ring my mother-in-law gave me when I got married.
What? Can I really accept something so precious?
Precious or not, it's dangerous to step on. It has no value just sitting around, and it's in the way. You're young, you'll find a use for it.
As usual, she said this with a stern expression and promptly returned to her room. Did she bring it for me? Seeing the ring warmed my heart. That night, I showed the ring to Nolan and Alice, our 5-year-old daughter. Alice, who had recently taken an interest in fashion, looked envious when she saw the large diamond ring.
Wow! Mom had such a diamond!
Indeed. We didn't notice because she lives so modestly.
When Dad passed away, there was quite an inheritance, but there's no record of her spending a cent. If she won't use it, maybe I should ask her to give it to me.
Come on, let's not be greedy. I scolded him, and Nolan laughed it off as a joke. Later, I carefully stored the ring as a cherished treasure. Despite the daily busyness and challenges, I found fulfillment in our daily life. Nolan's business seemed to be on track, and he traveled frequently, not only returning late at night but also going on more business trips. Then one night, when everyone was asleep, Alice suddenly woke me up.
Mom, wake up.
Alice? What's wrong? Alice shook me urgently, her face filled with an inexplicable fear. Had she had a bad dream? I moved closer to hug her, but she had something else to say.
We need to escape from Dad right now. Otherwise, both you and I might disappear.
Huh? Disappear? Confused, I tilted my head as Alice's words puzzled me. Maybe you dreamed it. Poor Alice, let's sleep together.
No. We have to run away. It's true.
Frustrated that I didn't understand, Alice half cried as she handed me her favorite stuffed animal. It was a recent Christmas gift with a recording function that allowed her to record her own voice. Curious, I listened to the recording. To my shock, it was Nolan's voice making a phone call. The content left me wide-eyed and speechless. Get rid of my mother for the insurance money, and make my wife and Alice disappear. I want to start over with you. The succession of horrifying statements made me feel nauseous.
Mom, you know what? I've been keeping a secret for a long time. Dad was getting along with a different woman. I saw it the other day.
Alice began to tell me a shocking story in a sobbing voice. The other day, Alice went to the aquarium on a field trip from her kindergarten. There, she witnessed Nolan's affair. Nolan, who had no interest in Alice at all, had chosen the aquarium as his date spot with his lover, which was the same place Alice was going on a field trip.
I followed Dad. And then, he told that lady that he loved her the most.
Alice started crying again as she remembered.
Dad only loves her. Doesn't he love Mom and me anymore?
Alice. I was furious at Nolan, who had made Alice so sad. But now was not the time to wake him up and confront him. The evidence was weak, and more importantly, I was worried about the content of the recording. Grandma's insurance money? Make me and Alice disappear? No way. I hurriedly packed my bags. Fortunately, Nolan's bedroom was at the back of the second floor, so it was okay to make a little noise. I didn't understand the meaning of the recorded voice clearly, but I felt it was dangerous by intuition. I finally finished packing and headed to the front door with Alice. But there was my mother-in-law in the way. She was desperately keeping her balance with a cane, and had a terrible look on her face with ragged breathing.
Wait! I won't let you run away like that.
Do you know something? I looked at Alice, and she shook her head. Alice hadn't told her mother-in-law.
Well,
Well,
it's winter now.
I won't let you take Alice out in such cold weather in that outfit.
She handed me some warm clothes. It was winter. I was so desperate to pack and run away that I didn't even think about giving Alice proper protection from the cold. I have something to talk to you about, Nolan. I decided to tell my mother-in-law about Nolan. I thought she was on our side.
I know. He's infatuated with another woman and plotting something terrible. He thinks I'm a senile old woman and looks down on me. But I'm Nolan's mother. I see through everything.
She looked a little sad. Did she know that her son was after her insurance money? Let's run away together. I walked up to my mother-in-law. I couldn't leave her in a place where there was someone who would target her own mother's insurance money. But she quietly shook her head.
I'll only slow you down if I go with you, so I'll pass. Besides, Nolan is my son. I'm responsible for raising such an idiot. I'm going to stick with him until the end.
What? What if something happens to you?
In that case, use all of my inheritance for Alice.
She handed me an envelope with a sad face. There were several $100s inside.
This is for your living expenses for a while. Take it and get out of here. Thanks for everything.
But... I tried to persuade her several times, but she wouldn't budge. I couldn't spend too much time, or Nolan would notice. Maybe I should leave her behind for today. That's what I was thinking, when I saw a faint smoke coming out of a room on the first floor. That was my mother-in-law's bedroom. I panicked and grabbed a fire extinguisher from the kitchen, and ran into the room. But the fire spread too fast, and one fire extinguisher wasn't enough. Alice, can you run? I didn't give her a choice and forcefully carried my mother-in-law on my back.
Hey, what are you doing? You'll be too late to escape if you carry an old cripple like me. Leave me behind. Hurry! Leave me behind.
Shut up! Just be quiet! I shouted and pulled Alice's hand, desperately heading for the front door. And somehow, I managed to open the door and escape outside. Almost at the same time, an ambulance and a fire truck arrived. It seemed that a neighbor who noticed something wrong had called them.
Nolan, my son is still inside.
Maybe even if her son was after her insurance money, she would instinctively try to save him as a mother. She staggered towards the fire, but fell after a few steps. It's okay. Let's leave it to the firefighters. The three of us were taken to the hospital by the paramedics who arrived. The three of us who quickly sensed the danger were almost unharmed. On the other hand, Nolan, who was surrounded by fire without noticing until the last minute, was rescued by the firefighters, but suffered severe burns all over his body. Fortunately, his life was saved. After calming down, I took Alice and my mother-in-law to Nolan's hospital room to talk. As soon as he saw me, Nolan glared at me and cursed loudly.
Hey, you heartless woman! Why didn't you save me?
I was too busy escaping with Alice and your mother.
Liar! You could have done something for me. You tried to kill me on purpose, didn't you? You're a scary woman.
Nolan kept screaming without listening to anyone. Suddenly, my mother-in-law, who had been listening behind me, walked up to Nolan and slapped him on the spot.
Stop it, you ungrateful son! You put not only me, but also Willow and Alice in danger. I won't forgive you.
What are you talking about?
Nolan pretended to be clueless. I told him that I knew everything about his affair.
I don't get it. Show me the proof.
Proof? The proof is at the police station right now. As soon as I said that, several police officers appeared in Nolan's hospital room. That's right, I had submitted the recording that Alice made to the police as soon as I finished the doctor's examination. The police officers who were investigating the fire suspected that it was intentionally set, and they seized the recording as evidence.
Nolan, we have a question about the fire that occurred at your house. We found traces of tampering with the outlet that was connected to the humidifier. Do you have any idea what that's about?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, that's fine. The forensics team is thoroughly examining the scene right now, so I'm sure the truth will come out soon. You just focus on your treatment, and we'll talk later.
The police officers smirked and left the room, leaving Nolan pale and frozen. A few days later, Nolan was discharged from the hospital and taken to the police station for questioning. The investigation continued, and Nolan's crime was confirmed. The truth behind the fire was this. Nolan, who was going on a business trip the next day, had rigged the outlet that was connected to the humidifier to start a fire while he was away. I liked the humidifier and turned it on every day during the day. On the other hand, the mother-in-law didn't touch it at all because it was too much trouble to plug and unplug it. Nolan expected that I would turn on the humidifier after he left for his trip, and that's when the fire would start. But the mother-in-law, who suspected his son's actions, noticed that he had tampered with the area around the humidifier, and turned it on while she was searching around by herself. That's why the fire started sooner than Nolan expected. Nolan was arrested for arson and attempted murder. There, I learned a new fact. Apparently, Nolan had been embezzling money from his company to lavish on his mistress. His co-founder friend was furious and determined to get back the money he had squandered. Even after Nolan was released, he would be in debt hell. After that, I divorced Nolan. Since the house had burned down, I found a new home with Alice and my mother-in-law. I had intended to live with my mother-in-law too. But she didn't want to be a burden to me, who was going to be a single mother, and she asked to move into a facility. As Nolan had expected, my mother-in-law had never used her late husband's inheritance, and she had a considerable fortune. After my mother-in-law passed away, Nolan, her only son, was supposed to inherit everything. But Nolan, who had committed a crime, became disqualified from inheriting, and lost his right to inheritance. On the night before she moved to the facility, my mother-in-law made a will that gave all her property to me and Alice.
I'm sorry, I can only apologize in this way.
My mother-in-law cried. Oh! Please smile. I said cheerfully. Alice and I love your smile. If you want to apologize, please smile a lot.
Okay.
She wiped her tears and showed me a smile. After that, my mother-in-law moved into the care facility. She looked happy surrounded by kind staff. Alice and I visit her once a month. I found a job and regained a place where I could feel safe. Today, I smile and start tomorrow.
How did you like this story? Please subscribe to my channel. See you in the next video.
After my husband's passing, the right to inherit his estate belongs to my daughter and me, which means my brother-in-law Robert has no claim to it. However, Robert seemed oblivious to this common understanding.
Both Samantha and I have finished preparing to move. We just need to move our stuff in.
We agreed to sell our house because we heard you were giving us your late husband's house. Isn't that a different story?
Her words were punctuated by a loud shriek. As a result, Mia, who was inside the house, must have noticed the situation at the front door. I couldn't involve my daughter in this any further. Moreover, I wanted to avoid any further conflict with my late husband's family. And above all, there were our own family matters to consider. As I pondered, Mia had already reached the entrance. Upon seeing Mia's face, did Robert think he had found someone to manipulate? With a pleased expression, he began to melodramatically discuss their unfortunate circumstances and how they might be saved. Initially skeptical, Mia's face gradually paled. Finally, she spoke.
Do you not know, Uncle?
I intervened, silencing Mia as she attempted to say more. I didn't want to escalate matters any further. Besides, it was clear that explaining anything to them would fall on deaf ears. Understood. Feel free to use it as you please. My name is Olivia. I am 44 years old and work at a medium-sized travel agency. Despite being married and having a daughter, I juggle work and homemaking responsibilities. My husband, who is the same age as me, is incredibly gentle and calm. He never gets angry or causes a fuss. In fact, he's so caring that he readily extends a helping hand to anyone in need, often putting others before himself. I've admired this selfless quality since we were dating. I met my husband over 20 years ago at a mixer. Initially, I had reservations about attending such an event, assuming it would be filled with superficial, self-centered people. However, a friend dragged me along, and I reluctantly went, putting minimal effort into my appearance. My plan was to sit quietly in a corner, focusing solely on eating. But then I noticed a man. He was busy serving salad and tending to intoxicated guests. His considerate actions caught my attention, and I felt an instant connection. Despite not usually showing interest in the opposite sex, I mustered the courage to strike up a conversation. To my surprise, we hit it off. He willingly exchanged contact information, and we arranged to meet again. Even during that brief mixer, his kindness shone through. When we met afterward, he remained just as genuine as my initial impression. Thanks to the encouragement from those around us, we eventually got engaged and happily tied the knot. Unlike the typical cautionary tales, my husband didn't transform into a mean-spirited man after marriage. Instead, our life together has been remarkably peaceful. My husband and I soon welcomed our daughter, Mia, into the world. She was the most adorable child, born from our deep love. My husband, too, was elated by our firstborn. His usual friendly smile grew even brighter, and he seemed almost ready to dance with joy. Since I returned to work relatively quickly, we shared household chores and parenting responsibilities. We respected each other's roles, and our parenting journey progressed smoothly. Marriage and raising a child are both challenging endeavors. However, my husband's kindness repeatedly saved me. Thanks to him, we have enjoyed peaceful days as a family of 3 since Mia's birth. Even our adorable daughter, Mia, has turned 20 this year. Perhaps I'm a doting parent, but I believe Mia has grown into a kind-hearted woman, much like her father. She treats her classmates in middle and high school equally, impresses her teachers, and even strikes up conversations with elderly people she encounters on the street. Her excessive kindness, reminiscent of her father, does worry me at times. However, so far, she has navigated life without any major issues and continues attending university. Although Mia still commutes from home to university, I know that in a few more years, she'll be ready to stand on her own. I assumed our life would continue as usual, just the two of us, after her coming-of-age ceremony went smoothly. But then, at the end of January, a significant event shook our family. Hey! Honey! What's wrong? My husband collapsed suddenly at the front door just before leaving for work. I had sensed that he wasn't feeling well today, but I never expected it to be this serious. He had mentioned feeling slightly short of breath earlier, but otherwise, he seemed like his usual self. I was in the midst of preparing breakfast as usual, getting ready for work. In my confusion, I quickly called an ambulance and accompanied him to the hospital. They diagnosed him with a heart attack. Why? How could this happen? Honey. My words were a jumble, and I might have even screamed. Mia, who had been away overnight, rushed over, breathless.
Dad.
In the cold hospital corridor, Mia and I sat on a sofa, desperately praying for my husband's safety. The doctors did their best, but unfortunately, he peacefully passed away, leaving us behind. When the doctor emerged from the treatment room with a somber expression, I felt overwhelming despair. Don't leave us. Mia continued to stroke my back as I sobbed in the hospital room. Her warm touch thawed my frozen spine.
Mom. I'm here for you.
Her voice is as gentle as her late father's. Even as an adult, I always thought of my child as forever my child. However, witnessing her comforting gestures, even when she must be grieving herself, made me realize how much my daughter has grown. Perhaps Mia's unwavering support played a role in helping me transition my feelings, even if just a little. Thanks to Mia, I managed to arrange the funeral smoothly. During the funeral, I received words of comfort and sympathy from my husband's relatives. Grateful for each one, I continued with the farewell ceremony. Although it was emotionally challenging, Mia and the support of those around me helped me get through it. Not only Mia and my husband's relatives, but my own parents also expressed concern during the difficult funeral. They suggested that I temporarily return to their home for care and comfort. While it might seem unconventional to say this in such circumstances, considering my emotional state, they believed it would bring peace of mind to both Mia and me. However, having been married and away from my parents' home for over 20 years, I needed a little more time to think. So, I declined their proposal, and just like that, I found myself in the position of a widow. The term a widow sometimes carries an image of financial instability. However, as a full-time employee, I had some financial security. Mia's excellent academic performance also meant her university tuition was partially waived, which was a relief. Yet, after the turmoil settled, a new concern arose when we dealt with the estate and other posthumous matters. It was a problem that clashed with our tasks, and for the first time, I sighed at the memory of my late husband. What does the future hold for us? The shock was immense because I deeply loved my husband. Still, I knew Mia and those around us were firmly on my side. I resolved to face this issue head-on and consider our path forward. With that determination, approximately 2 months have passed since that day. Suddenly, without any warning, a car came to a halt in front of our house. It happened to be my day off from work, so I was surprised and stepped out onto the doorstep. The car was dirty and had visible scratches, and I recognized the license plate. It had been forcefully parked sideways near the garage in our yard. The impact had even chipped some bricks from the flower bed I was tending. Clearly, the driver had entered at quite a speed, maneuvering into the spot. "Robert, what on earth brings you here?" Robert, my late husband's younger brother, had arrived unexpectedly without any prior notice. His long, weathered blonde hair seemed even more faded than during the funeral. I hadn't noticed earlier, as he had been dressed plainly, but now he was wearing a worn-out t-shirt as his everyday clothing. As he stepped out of the car, he blurted out,
"I'm taking over this house. Pack your things and leave immediately."
I couldn't fathom what he was saying. This house was jointly built with our savings after my husband and I got married. It wasn't Robert's family home. Moreover, Robert had never lived here, having been independent when I married. Except for family events, we rarely interacted with each other. Additionally, due to my husband's passing, the inheritance rights didn't extend to Robert, given my daughter and me. However, common sense seemed to elude Robert entirely.
Mia is his daughter, so it's fine. I, as his biological brother, have a rightful claim over this house, even more so than you, who are not blood related to him.
Robert proceeded to explain his current situation. Apparently, he was burdened with excessive debt and had to sell his own home. He claimed that, as the brother, he should rightfully inherit a portion of his late brother's estate. At that moment, I recalled something. Robert had a penchant for gambling, a fact that my gentle husband had expressed concern about Robert seeking assistance from the family. During the funeral, I was too distraught to pay attention, but now it all came back to me. There was an incident during a family gathering at our in-laws' house. It was the day after a family event at my in-laws, where only my husband had returned. Amidst the gathering of relatives, it seems Robert shamelessly asked for money from not only his parents but also my husband, who is Robert's brother, and relatives. My husband, who typically refrains from speaking ill of others, surprised me by making such a statement. I remember feeling somewhat apprehensive about what kind of person Robert, the brother-in-law who could prompt my husband to say this, truly was. Robert's character was starkly different from my husband's warm-hearted and generous nature. Perhaps it stemmed from their upbringing. My husband, the eldest son, had been raised strictly, while Robert, who was frail as a child, hadn't faced much discipline or scolding. Although my in-laws didn't intentionally create differences, perhaps due to these contrasting experiences, Robert has grown into an adult who struggles to discipline himself. The older ladies in the extended family have expressed similar sentiments. Now, this very Robert is advancing toward me with a menacing expression. "Even if you suddenly say something like that, this house." I was taken aback by the unexpected and unconventional proposal, which didn't align with common sense or legal norms. However, Robert continued, interrupting my words.
"Both Samantha and I have finished preparing to move. We just need to move our stuff in."
He forcefully pressed on with his argument. As the tension escalated, another person stepped out of the car. She walked in high heels, a middle-aged woman. Although we hadn't interacted much beyond family events, I instantly recognized her as Robert's wife, Samantha. According to our relatives, Samantha had a peculiar hobby. She frequently spent nearly $400 on lottery tickets, claiming it was to make up for her husband's losses. Needless to say, this extravagant behavior didn't sit well with their family. Samantha joined the argument, defending Robert.
"We agreed to sell our house because we heard you were giving us your late husband's house. Isn't that a different story?"
Her voice echoed through the room. Mia, who was inside the house, must have noticed the situation at the front door. We heard footsteps descending the stairs from the second floor. I couldn't involve my daughter any further. Besides, I wanted to avoid any further conflict with my late husband's family. And above all, there were our own family matters to consider. As I pondered, Mia had already reached the entrance. Suddenly, Robert appeared in front of her, and Mia couldn't hide her surprise. Robert, upon seeing Mia's face, must have thought he had found someone to manipulate. With a pleased expression, he began melodramatically discussing their unfortunate circumstances and how they might be saved, seeking sympathy. Initially skeptical, Mia's face gradually paled. Finally, she spoke.
Do you not know, Uncle?
I intervened, silencing Mia as she attempted to say more. I didn't want to escalate matters any further. Besides, it was clear that explaining anything to them would fall on deaf ears. Understood. Feel free to use it as you please, I said, stopping Mia's surprised gaze. I informed Robert and Samantha that we would be vacating the house in a month. They seemed pleased that their proposal had been accepted. Given the physical and emotional challenges of moving immediately today, I requested some time. Perhaps because of this, Robert and Samantha were in better spirits and willing to listen. I asked them to leave for today, just temporarily, and took Mia back indoors with me. As soon as the front door closed, Mia furrowed her brows and said,
Mom, even if you say that.
Mia had been worried, but I had a small plan in mind. I whispered the details of the plan to her. She understood and agreed to cooperate. We decided to leave the house of our own accord. First, I would follow my parents' suggestion and return to my parents' home. As for Mia, she couldn't continue attending university from my parents' house, so she opted to live alone in a studio apartment. While I wished she would come with me, I understood that I couldn't ask her to give up her education. Besides, she had her own dreams and aspirations related to her university studies. Although I had previously emphasized the challenges of living alone, her determination was unwavering. With that settled, I planned to call my parents right away. Meanwhile, Mia was diligently searching for student apartments on her smartphone. My parents readily agreed to my return, and Mia's apartment search went smoothly since there happened to be vacancies. Additionally, we easily found movers for both of us, likely due to it being an off-peak season. Despite the suddenness of it all, the move went surprisingly well. And so, Mia and I bid farewell to the house filled with memories of my late husband. The moving process was complete, and Mia was gradually adjusting to living alone. One day, my parents' home's phone rang. I glanced at the unfamiliar number on the landline panel. Lately, there have been many telemarketing calls targeting elderly people like my parents, so I hesitated. However, the incessant ringing forced me to pick up the receiver. Hello? I answered. The moment I placed the receiver to my ear, a booming voice echoed through the line.
Olivia!
It was Robert, and his shouting was so intense that it felt like feedback. His angry voice was familiar, and I listened as he continued.
You know what they told me? That if I kept living in your house, they'd call the police. What's going on?
Robert sounded frantic. He seemed utterly confused, so I tried to calm him down before asking for the details. According to Robert, after we moved out, he and Samantha had indeed moved into our former home as planned. Initially, everything went well. They settled in and lived there for a while. However, things took an unexpected turn when an unknown real estate company showed up. Worse yet, the company's employees had a master key to the house, so they entered without permission, and Robert couldn't force them out. The real estate company claimed that the house was already listed as a used property for sale, and if Robert continued to stay, it would be considered trespassing. This couldn't be right. Had they mistaken another house, or was it a scam or robbery? Robert was convinced and argued back, but it seemed that the police were genuinely close to being called. I sighed heavily as I listened to the whole story. Indeed, that house has already been sold. As the real estate company stated, it should now be listed as a used property for sale. Robert seemed stunned by my words, and I could hear Samantha's voice in the background, exclaiming her confusion. Robert shouted again.
What are you talking about?
I wasn't lying. Without a doubt, I had sold that house. Moreover, the transfer of ownership had already been completed just before Robert and Samantha visited. The issue that came to light after my husband's death was related to his own death. During the estate proceedings, I discovered this for the first time. While I knew that estates could sometimes include negative aspects, I never imagined it would directly affect us. Apparently, my husband had acted as a guarantor for a friend's debt. That friend had disappeared as soon as the guarantor section was filled out, leaving my husband responsible for repayment. We even found documents demanding payment from my husband's creditor. The circumstances surrounding why my late husband decided to assist his acquaintance remain unknown. Perhaps he trusted the person too easily and willingly signed, or maybe he was coerced into it. Given his kind-hearted nature, the former seems more likely, but the truth remains in darkness. What's certain is that his kindness and generosity worked against him. Furthermore, his silence about the matter likely stemmed from his desire not to worry our family. The amount demanded was substantial, certainly not something I could easily pay, despite my job and my daughter's relatively low tuition fees. When I consulted my parents, they responded,
Why not sell the house and come back? We're always ready to welcome you.
My parents had previously encouraged me to return home after my husband's passing, and now they were suggesting it again. With one family member gone, our house felt too large for us. I became open to the idea of selling it. I couldn't remain in shock forever. Now that my daughter had grown up and become an adult, perhaps it was time to start anew. I agreed with my parents' proposal. As for Mia, whether she would accompany me or live independently remained undecided until the last moment. However, when Robert and Samantha visited, the house had already been sold. In other words, at that point, the house was no longer mine. That was the truth of the matter.
I never heard any of that.
I was trying to discuss the matter of the house's ownership at that time. I replied, interrupting their conversation. Robert and Samantha, oblivious to my words, continued to insist that the house rightfully belonged to them. Anticipating this outcome, I had already considered moving back to my parents' home and confirmed Mia's readiness for independent living. We left without further ado, leaving the house behind. This had been my small plan. Still, I couldn't help but think that if Robert and Samantha had taken the ownership transfer seriously and completed the necessary paperwork, they wouldn't be in this situation. Unfortunately, their carefree attitude, failing to even transfer the title, led to their abrupt eviction under the guise of legal proceedings. It seems they clung to the real estate company until the end, but eventually, they were truly reported to the police. Although they didn't acquire a criminal record, they were forcibly evicted. Robert and Samantha had already sold their own house, leaving them with no place to go. They sought refuge with Robert's parents and relatives, burdened by their belongings. However, their extended family knew all too well about Robert and Samantha's debt-ridden situation. They refused to accept a compulsive gambler into their homes, including their parents. Even though Robert and Samantha had apparently considered seeking help from me and Mia, they had no way of finding me, given their lack of knowledge about my parents' home. Additionally, they were unaware of Mia's university or her current residence. We were confident that we wouldn't be hounded by Robert and Samantha. They were no longer our concern. Robert and Samantha, left with no other options, seemed to spiral into despair. They poured their remaining funds into gambling and lottery tickets, only to suffer significant losses. Despite this, they were averse to the idea of living as homeless or relying on government assistance for a meager existence. Their desperation led them to even borrow from loan sharks, and they continued their cycle of gambling and lottery, seemingly undeterred. However, this time, their involvement with loan sharks left them with no room for evasion. During a meeting where my late husband's parents apologized for their initial misunderstanding, I learned that Robert and Samantha had fallen into this dire situation. Even his parents had no further information. They can't even trace their whereabouts, and lately, there's been no communication or even requests for money. When I think about it, their situation becomes somewhat apparent. The fact that my late husband's brother has fallen into such circumstances is heartbreaking. His parents' feelings must be even more intense. They regretted having indulged their younger son too much during his frail childhood. Moreover, the consequences of their elder son's generosity had now affected their grandchild. Despite it all, they sincerely apologized to me and Mia. They assured us that they would not assist Robert in the future. Initially, I felt uneasy about the role they played in this situation, but their genuine eyes convinced me that we could continue our relationship amicably. They prioritized Mia and me, handling the situation with care. Although my husband was no longer with us, Mia and I promised to visit my in-laws regularly. Mia, who loved both my parents and my late husband's parents, was thrilled about this arrangement. As for me, returning to my parents' home meant leaving my previous job. Unlike my daughter's university, which was still commutable, I was at an age where long commutes were no longer feasible. I decided to prioritize my well-being and avoid unnecessary stress. Despite my husband's passing and selling our house, my colleagues and superiors expressed concern about my work situation. However, I found a job in a similar field that allowed remote work. Currently, I rent a room in my parents' home and diligently work from there. Adjusting to working from home has its challenges, but I'm gradually getting used to this new lifestyle. Mia and I keep in touch regularly. Although she's feeling quite anxious about her new life, I believe my daughter will be fine. She's putting effort into managing household chores, studying, and working part-time, all while receiving guidance from friends who live alone. Learning from this experience, she has become more cautious about excessive kindness, recognizing that it can sometimes harm oneself.
First, take care of yourself. Mom, you need to prioritize your own well-being.
During her recent visit to my place, Mia shared these encouraging words. I felt both touched by my daughter's growth and reassured. Mia, with a bashful smile, added,
Right now, my goal is to find someone wonderful, like you and Dad, to share my life with.
Oh, you thought of me that way? Her words filled me with indescribable joy. We exchanged smiles, mother and daughter. Although I know I'll face more challenges ahead, I'm determined to live strongly with the help of Mia, my parents, and the people around me. I want to create a beautiful life, one that my late husband would be proud of.
How did you find this story? If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing to our channel. Until next time.